We're on page 138. Maran, Siman Kuf Nun Tet, Sif Yud Bet. Man writes, Im HaKof, if a monkey. Kof.
Is that what the...
Modern Hebrew word for monkey today is kof. Perush min chaya, in the parentheses there's a type of animal. Belaz shimya. In, I don't know which language, Spanish, French, old language, not today. He writes shimya, like a chimp. That would be the word. How do you say monkey in Spanish?
Chanco.
Chanco?
Chanco.
How do you say chimpanzee?
Chimpanzee.
Okay, so it's not Spanish. Noten mayim leyadayim. Even if it's a monkey that's pouring water over your hands, yesh poslim. Some say it's forbidden. V'yesh machshirim, and some say it's okay. V'nirin divrehem, says Maran, and their words seem to be correct. So, not only do we have the rule when Maran says one opinion and then another opinion, you follow the second opinion, but Maran actually says one opinion, then he says the second opinion, and then he says, and the second one seems correct. Haga, umikol makom yesh lachmir. Rama says nonetheless one should be strict and not. I think we have extras of that in the shelf. One should be strict and not have a monkey wash his hands. So according to Sfaradim, if a monkey were to wash your hands, it's okay. According to Ashkenazim, it's not okay. Meaning it's okay, but you shouldn't do it. So, im hakof noten mayim al yadayim, under the two lines. If a monkey puts water on your hands, vanoten litkaven l'shem mitzvah netilat yadayim, but the person who's having his hands washed, so there's the washer and there's the what? The washi.
Washi.
So that person, they have kavanah. This water that the monkey's pouring on my hands is for the mitzvah of netilat yadayim. Ledat Maran Shulchan Aruch Siman. According to Maran, you can be lenient and allow the monkey to wash your hands as long as you have the proper intention. ולמנהג הספרדים ועדות המזרח, and according to the minhag of the Sfaradim, הרוצה לעשות כן, יש לו על מה שיסמוך. You can rely on. Who do you have to rely on? The opinion that Maran says to rely on. ובעיקר הדין, and according to the basic halakha, thank you so much. אם רצה אף לברך על נטילה זו, רשאי לעשות כן. Even if you wish to make a blessing on this hand washing, it would be allowed. Meaning, it's not that it's allowed in the sense of if you have no other choice and a monkey is going to pour water on your hands, and you have the kavanah, then okay, you could do it. Here it's saying if you can make a bracha, that means even on an ideal level, this is allowed. ואם לא נתכוון הנוטה לשם מצוות תלת ידיים, ראוי להחמיר שיחזור ביתו לידיו בלא ברכה. And if a person does not have the proper intention, the monkey's pouring, he has no intention obviously, you're having the water poured on you, but you don't have any intention, it's preferable according to this opinion to go back and wash your hands a second time. But according to the custom of Ashkenazim, אין להקל בקוף כלל. There is no leniency by monkeys at all. Isn't amazing this halakha? ולמנהגם, אפילו בדיעבד, אם נתן הקוף מים על ידיו, נכוון שיחזור ויטול וידיו בלא ברכה.
Darno, it's just to go and use my pet monkey.
According to Ashkenazim, even if you have kavanah, it's better to go back and wash your hands again without a monkey this time.
So go back to the pet
halakha was
store.
developed in Morocco. So clearly this halakha was developed in Morocco. So I have
Oh yeah,
no
that
idea.
monkey's doing all kinds of things there.
There are some opinions that want to say monkeys are actually a very good way to wash your hands. The different opinions that go on over here.
You could probably train a monkey. Let's say you had like a seder, go around.
To go around and wash
Yes.
people's hands.
There are things like that in North Africa, all kinds of crazy things.
What is the purpose of this halakha? What are you actually trying? We don't really.
We're
find
trying to
the one-
determine, can anybody wash your
Very good. We're trying to determine can anybody wash hands and which level of kavanah is necessary when the hands are being washed.
Anybody.
So now, do you remember when Maran says that a child under 6, who doesn't have that, doesn't really have intelligent thinking in the terms of they're fulfilling a mitzvah, that they can wash their hands, but the Ramah says it's better not to? This is directly correlated to the conversation about monkeys. And a child under 6, according to the poskim, is like a monkey. Nobody get offended here. In the sense that he doesn't have his own intelligent thought in a mitzvah.
That's like when we have a minyan, we ask a child, who are you praying to?
Very good.
Same type
So
of
the question, and by the way, over there we argue as well. Sfaradim say it's okay, Ashkenazim don't. This is again, you have here the minimum level of kavanah by Netilat Yadayim for Maran is that you, the person having your hands washed, should have the proper kavanah. Whereas for the Raman, no, we want also the person who's washing the hands to be able to have kavanah also. This is really what we're boiling it down to. That's the purpose of this halakha.
What about something like an android? Because in the future we're going to have
Robot.
robots doing things.
It's gonna be the same. It's gonna be the same idea. It's not
Even though it's not a sentient being.
correct. Correct.
I guess we're gonna
All
let
the
her
more
give it.
so because your intention is on the machine and in the act.
See, now this is
So
where it
you're-
gets
you're-
complicated.
that's
Remember
interesting,
by
yeah.
the machine matzah?
Oh yeah.
There were wars about that. Can the machine have enough kavanah to do the mitzvah of matzah? There were real wars. Europe almost burned down over this argument.
But the machine was designed for the matzah.
But it doesn't have logical
there was
thought.
Right. Okay. So
If I did require matzah to have intelligent thought going into each matzah being baked, in that scenario, a machine wouldn't cut it.
No pun intended.
The question there was really, if the person who presses the button of the machine has kavanah, is that enough kavanah involved? You have to understand, we were talking machine matzahs in the olden days in Europe. They didn't have buttons in machines. It's not manishevet.
Like-
It was like they were cranking the matzahs
Right.
through. They were moving them to the other side of the machine, and they everything was done what we would consider today manually.
Right.
Usually, and there was my father, he gave a shiur about this a few years ago in Shavuot. I don't remember. He brought an extensive list of sources. I still have them in my house. And he did some pretty incredible research on this topic. And there was a Chabad rabbi in Israel, a posek, and he made a matzah factory. Part of his matzah factory had the part that flattens the dough, if I'm not mistaken, was cranked by a hand crank. What do you call that thing? Whatever it is. And the other rabbis went nuts, crazy. Oh, it's not a machine. It's not a handmade matzah. It's a machine matzah. And then Chabad went out against him. And then he said, "Listen, the whole thing. What would the Rebbe have said? Had the Rebbe been here? It was a big conversation. It boiled down to him saying, you know those metal poles they use when you knead the dough? Is that a machine? I mean, if my cranking the dough through a flattener is a machine, then who says that the rolling pin that you use in the matzah factory is not a machine?
Right.
I mean, you're going to reach a place where you can't even use something to mix the water with because that's a machine. I mean,
It's a logical argument. You keep extending it out.
correct.
Before you know
His
it.
whole thing is you are not giving a halachic definition of what is a machine that's forbidden to make matzot. You're simply banning any kind of contraption that helps you in the making of matzah, and that's not a halachic category because it's undefinable. And even though he was right, they boycotted his matzot, and from what I understand, he doesn't make matzot.
No. A related question, but maybe slightly off the issue. Like when a Rebbe was the Lubavitcher Rebbe considered to be a posek in and of himself?
It's a very difficult question to answer, and I don't know that I'm the right one to ask this question to.
I understand, but if a Rebbe gives an opinion or says something, it seems like people hold by it, and it seems like they take a shortcut around halacha. Because I know there's Shulchan Aruch Siman, right?
Oh, this is a great question. I'm gonna.
Because I'm very confused about that. It's like the Rebbe said we do this, but is that a psak din,
Right.
or is it an opinion based al pi kava? Where is it coming from? I mean, I'm not just with the Lubavitcher
No, so
Rebbe.
no, but exactly. Let's
anybody
not
like that.
talk specifically about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Clearly had the knowledge is not lacking, but the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
Oh,
He's
of course, God forbid.
Rabbi Mordechai Halevy said about him, "Kol raz lo an Islam." There's nothing he didn't know, and so that's not a question here. The question is really the other way around. What is the job description of a Hasidic Rebbe? This is somewhere where instead of going to what is he or what is he not, what does it mean to be a Rebbe? When I first got married, this is one of my earliest conversations with my wife. What is the Rebbe's job? Is he a posek? Well, that's not his primary function. Okay. Does he read the Torah at services? No, it's beneath a Rebbe to be the Torah reader. Okay. Does he lead services? Like on a yard side of family? Okay, fine. So I go through a list of things that normally. Does he do people's weddings? No, it's a big deal to get the Rebbe to come to your wedding. Okay. Is he a mohel? No. The rest of them, no. So what on earth does the Rebbe do? He provides spiritual guidance. Now you have to understand, the Litvish in me that studied in Baltimore laughs and is like, oh, spiritual guidance. Okay, so everyone, the guy at 7-Eleven can do that too. And what's the spiritual guidance? Big deal. the Hasidim invented a new office. It's a new. They'll tell you it's old. I've had my many debates. The tzaddik is an old term, but let's say that until the founding of the Hasidic movement and a little bit afterwards, the job of a rabbi is primarily lifsok halakha, to determine halachic matters. That's what the rabbi is sitting and talking. Yes, matters of philosophy as well, the commentaries in the Chumash, absolutely. But the primary function is to lead a community, and how do you lead a community? Within the realm of halakha. And so what kind of rabbi could then say, oh, I'm not a posek? You find something interesting that happens, and that somewhere along Hasidic history, I'm not a Hasidic historian, you have to ask them, you find that rebbes start hiring a posek. In most Hasidic courts, not all, there were exceptions to this rule. For example, Rav Chaim of Sanz was an exception to this rule. A number of I believe the Rabbi Munkach also was an exception to this rule. They would be the Rebbe, and there was an Av Bedin, or the head of the Bedin, who would make halachic rulings for the community. The Rebbe doesn't give smicha, the Bedin gives smicha. There are a number of things which kind of creates it's like two different heads. There's the halachic head of the community and the spiritual head of the community. In the Sephardic world, we don't understand how spirituality could exist outside of the realm of halacha. I'm going to be honest. And therefore, the Sephardic rabbi's role is to guide the community spiritually as dictated by halakha. In the Hasidic community, though, there's a lot more, and I'm judging favorably, a lot more that goes. There's Kabbalah that comes in, there's what the previous rebbes did, what Jews in Europe did, reactions to the reform or conservative movements that they were struggling, all kinds of things that go into the Jewish
There's a lot
equation.
of gray area, and that was, for years and years, trying to study and weed through all that. It's like, what is actual Jewish law? What are opinions? What are, as you say, reactions? What are minhagim? And everything seems to be glommed
It's
together.
kind of mushed together.
Well, if you do this, you have to dress like this, or you're expected to do that, or we don't accept your kashrut unless you do. It's like
There's
it goes
a famous
on.
story, and I'm sure that the
it's all
Satmar
glommed
Hasidim
together.
will disagree with the story. But the famous story told by the Satmar Rebbe. When the Satmar Rebbe wrote his book, Vayoel Moshe, which is his endless diatribe against the state of Israel and Zionism, and how only the Satan could have created the state of Israel. It's a big, thick book with thousands of sources in it, by the way. The Satmar Rebbe, but this is exactly what Chachamim say. Chachamim say in the Talmud, Kan derachim l'teher et hasheretz. There are 150 ways to make an impure animal kosher. If you are a real Talmid Chacham, you can bring sources to anything you want. If truth and Hashem are not guiding you, then you could use whatever Jewish sources you want to justify anything in the world it is that you do or don't do. And the person who's going to break Shabbat, if they knew halakha well enough, could find a way to allow them to. Everyone's got their own. You want to eat a pig? I'm sure you could find a way to. This is something that can be done. So when the Satmar Rebbe wrote his book, he sent it to the Av Bedin. And Satmar, that's a word. There's a Rebbe and there's a posek. So he sent it to the posek to get a letter of approval on the book. Yeah, that's what normally you do. When you print a book, you get a letter of approval. So he waited a week and he didn't get a letter of approval. He waited 2 weeks and then got a letter of approval. So he finally bumps into the door and said, "No, when's my letter? Rebbe, give me another week." Give him another week. Didn't get a letter. So finally he met the Dayan and said, "Listen, what's going on? How come you're not giving me a letter of approval?" So this is supposedly the conversation. Obviously, I'm sure no Satmar man in the world will back me up on this. But as I've seen written in books about this topic from the other side, the Dayan told the Satmar Rebbe, he said, "Rebbe, if this book is a work of halakha, I cannot write a letter of approval because it does not conform to the rules and regulations of halakha. It doesn't stand the peer review of halakha. If this is a work that is written in Ruach HaKodesh, and because of that it's divinely inspired and therefore must be correct," he said, "I trust that the Rebbe has Ruach HaKodesh and therefore I believe that everything he writes in this book is true, but Ruach HaKodesh is outside of my jurisdiction to write letters of approval for." And that's famously why the Satmar Rebbe's book doesn't have a letter of approval from his own Hasidic community on it. Because it was written, it doesn't conform to the guidelines of how halachic work is written. And there is this idea, listen, our Rebbe, he said something, and that was because Hashem told him, Eliyahu and Navi told him. That might actually be true. It simply doesn't fit into the halachic equation. When I want to argue with a halakha, so I have to judge, is it biblical, rabbinic, is it a custom, like you mentioned? Then I know how much flexibility do we have with this halakha. If fasting on Tisha B'Av is rabbinic, then I have a certain level of flexibility. If it's pushed off and that makes it in a lesser rabbinic category, then I have even more flexibility with it. But if you tell me something is al pi ruach hakodesh, it comes through divine inspiration to human, I don't know how to rule. What category does that fall into? how do you debate this? I can't debate it on Navi, but I can tell you it doesn't fit.
But what's the fine line between Ruach HaKodesh and the Vuah?
Oh, very good.
Because there are the Rambam talks about, there are actual requirements of a Navi.
So it's none other than the Lubavitcher Rebbe who actually asked this question in the first chapter of Pirkei Avot, in the first Mishnah. Lubavitcher Rebbe is a fascinating work, which is today translated into English, so I'm very excited to say that. It's probably been around for a while, but I only recently started in English.
I've read it.
It's called Biurim LePirkei Avot, like commentaries on Pirkei Avot. It's very important. Don't buy something that's paraphrased. Buy it if it's an actual translation from Lubavitcher Rebbe's writing. It's very important that you read the original. And in there, the Lubavitcher Rebbe has a big question on the Torah transmission from Sinai. Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. Moshe received from Sinai. He gave to Yoshua. Yoshua to the elders. The elders. It goes through the prophets at a certain point. And Lubavitcher Rebbe's question is: we know that you're not allowed to study halakha from prophets. Prophets don't teach halakha. I mean, prophecy, halakha that comes through prophecy is not binding on the Jewish people. Only Moshe Rabbeinu got prophecy in Mount Sinai, and that's the Torah that we follow. Everything else must come through the rules of Torah logic. And so the Lubavitcher is, how could it be that the prophets are part of the transmission of the Torah from Sinai when we know that you don't accept halakha from prophecy? And the Lubavitcher rules that they were mentioned as prophets only because that's who they were. That was their profession. They were prophets. But when they transmitted halakha, they did not transmit it as prophets. Rather, they transmitted it as chachamim. I mean, they would teach their yeshiva, in this role, I'm a chacham. I'm not a prophet. Everything I'm sharing with you does not come from the realm of prophecy. The moment a halakha comes from the realm of prophecy, we don't deal with it. In fact, the whole concept of saying Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, that we say that it's a minhag of the prophets, that's precisely why the Rambam rules it's forbidden to say a blessing on it. Because it doesn't have you cannot bless on a custom that doesn't come from the chachamim, the proper channels of chokhmah. So that's a fantastic point, and it's the Lubavitcher Rebbe himself that codified such a concept. And I would just, on the last note, if we're talking about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, I think it's very important, and I used to have years in my life where these matters concern me a lot more. Today, I really don't dabble so much in this field, but if somebody were to seriously sit down and study the writings of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I'm far from telling people that they don't understand their own rabbi's writings, that's not fair, it's not correct, but you can very much see the difference between the writings, the teachings, even the halachic approach of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and what is on the street of those who admire him endlessly. And you see that there is dissonance there. It's not, God forbid, I'm not even saying it in a negative way, it's simply different. When I once spoke to a Chabad Chassid, a Torah scholar, he wasn't an ignoramus, and I said, do you ever study? And I mentioned a number of books. He said, I don't have time to study your books. We have so many of our own books from our own Rebbe that until I finish all of those, I'm not even going to bother opening up your books. And I said, that's really interesting that you say that, but your Rebbe was a prime example of somebody who studied all the books he got his hands on. If you look through the Lubavitcher Rebbe's notes in his books, it's just that it's an exciting adventure. If you know names of rabbis, it's unbelievable from where he pulls information. I mean, from people in his generation, contemporaries like Rabbi Yosef, who in the street they say they were big enemies, but you see him quoted. He quotes him as the genius Rabbi Yosef, as he quotes him inside of his book. To quoting rabbis that were not even big fans of the Hasidic movement or the Hasidic communities.
And secular sources as well.
I personally don't see him in his footnotes quoting, but I'm certain that he was a broader
when he would
person.
talk to scientists, he would talk
Yeah,
science,
correct. Yeah, that's true. And so when I approached this Hasid about that, I said, your Rebbe was the one that took from everywhere, and his answer to me was, I'm not the Rebbe. I mean, I am a Hasid. He's the Rebbe, I'm a Hasid. That's a different thing. Listen, again, my head, I don't know how to wrap around that. I'm simply saying that there are Hasidim or Hasidic Rebbes you could pick on for going around this halachic process, but Lubavitcher Rebbe, interestingly enough, is not one of them. At least the majority of instances that I'm familiar with. Page 140. Lechatchila, says Maran, on an ideal level, צריך לכוון הנוטה לנטילה המכשרת, I'm going to say it that way, לאכילה. A person ideally has to have in mind to wash their hands, a hand washing that would, what does it mean, machshir? What does kosher mean, kasher? What's the definition of that word?
Acceptable.
according to
No, there you go. Acceptable.
but according to.
No, not necessarily. The way we use it today might be this food is kosher for consumption according to Jewish law. The word kasher, literally in Hebrew, I'm going to give you an example.
It's like fit.
Ash, can I borrow your cup for a second? Technically, in Old Hebrew, if I were to speak about this, my opening up of this cup, that opening, would be said that I was machshir it for use. I created it to be usable. That's the word, able. A-B-L-E at the end of a word. That's what kasher means. Anything that you make fit, what's the word used? Acceptable, or usable, or
to make something able.
to make something able. That's exactly the definition of kasher. Okay, so, very good.
Very broad.
This water has to be water that is machshir la'achila. It enables eating. Meaning you want to make sure that the kavanah that you have when you wash your hands, that I want to wash my hands in such a fashion that would allow me to then eat bread afterwards. That's the thought process you have to have. Now this next Ramah is a fascinating Ramah. To say the truth, I don't even know that I understand it. We're going to talk about it later. You know what? Let's talk about it today. Let's read this Ramah. It's going to be very interesting for you. Hagar, Ramah has a note. V'kavanat noten nami mo'il. Afilu lechatchila. The intent of the noten, of the one who's pouring the water, is sufficient even on an ideal level. Af al pi shelo kiven hanotel kalal. Even though the one whose hands are being washed has no kavanah whatsoever. Yeah, it's exactly how I felt about it too, Mark. Meaning, I wash hands. Okay, Zev washes Baruch's hands. Baruch is thinking about which URL he's going to use for tonight's YouTube video. And Zev, though, has kavanah. I'm washing your hands in order to eat bread. Baruch noticed his hands get wet. Oh, thank you, Zev. What was that for? I did it so you could eat bread by Kiddush. Good. He just has to dry his hands and go to the table. The fact that Zev had kavanah when he poured the water is enough to allow Baruch to eat bread, according to the Rambam. I mean, it's the exact opposite in the monkey case. In the monkey case, the person who's having his hands washed has to have kavanah. But that's because the monkey himself cannot have kavanah. But here, where Zev, Baruch Hashem, has much more intelligence than a monkey.
Thank you.
You're getting compliments tonight, Zev. Then his kavanah is enough to take care of Baruch's lack of kavanah. That should have been on camera.
Yeah.
No. Under the two lines. Ve'af leminhag Sfaradi. And even for the custom of the Sfaradi. Mi'ikar hadin linyan kof. Oh, this is a fascinating halakha left over from before. This halakha here listen to this one. V'af leminhag Sfaradim. Even the custom of Sfaradim, ha'mekilim mi'ikar hadin linyan kof, who are lenient that a monkey can wash their hands. Nachon להחמיר בזה לעניין שאר חיות ובהמות ומולפים. You should still refrain from having other animals that are trained from washing your hands. This is a special halakha regarding a monkey. All other animals that can wash your hands don't fall into this category. I want to actually explore that with you in a second, but that's not what I wanted to talk about. So before we lose that train of thought, the next sentence says, "Din the halakha im tzarich b'ntilat yadayim kavanat notel or kavanat noten." Regarding whether it's the pourer or the one who's having his hands poured on who has to have kavanah. We've discussed above in the halacha b'wa. We probably skipped that halacha b'wa, so I'm going to go back and see if we want to do that again. But he's saying, I mean, there is an extensive conversation about who is the one that has to have kavanah, the pourer or the puree, the pourer, the one who had his hands poured on. It was okay. It was like legs have tables.
Legs have
Tables have legs. Let's read the footnote here in the bottom right. Let's talk about
Does the
monkeys.
whole monkey thing go back to the story about where's the monkey man?
About monkey what?
Monkey man.
Not that I know, but we're going to talk about now where the monkey stuff comes from.
Okay.
Lamed Bet. You see footnote Lamed Bet in the bottom right?
Yeah.
Ayin Bekesef.
Ayin Bekesef Mishneh. Look in the Kesef Mishneh. Who wrote Kesef Mishneh? I ask this every time we do it. Kesef Mishneh is Maran. Rabbi Yosef Karo. Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote a few books. His first book, not first, but the most famous, maybe Shulchan Aruch. The second most famous,
Ayin Kesef.
no, you know, Bet Yosef.
I bet you know.
Has come to the Bet Yosef. The third, Kesef Mishneh. That's a commentary on the Rambam. The fourth is his questions and answers, which are floating somewhere in the middle of the ocean. I lost in the post office. Lost my book somewhere. This one is called Afkat Rochel. And then last but not least, Maran has a book. Some say he didn't write it, but according to tradition, he wrote it. It's called Magid Meisharim. It's all the conversations he had with the angel that came to speak to him. Yeah. I never owned a copy of that book, but Rabbi Levi Moro bought me a copy for my birthday many years ago. Aramaic and Hebrew. And it's one of the strangest books I've read in my whole life. That much I can tell you. Not that I understand much, but from what I read and understood.
So even someone who's like a posek of that order has a whole realm of existence like that sometimes comes through that's completely different and
Correct.
the other side of rationality.
Those rationalists who don't like Maran will say, see, so he wasn't really a posek. Those who do like Maran and want to uphold him as a rationalist will say he didn't really write that book. Maybe it was attributed to him, but he didn't write it. And then there are those who say, no, he wrote both, but he's a complex personality like any other complex personality you're familiar with.
He channeled it.
Ayin Bekesef Mishneh. Look in the Kesef Mishneh. Shnistapek b'Shaar Ba'alei Chaim, who has doubt regarding other animals, im dinam kedin kof, if they have the same halachic category or classification as a monkey. Apparently, an initial thought, לפי מה שכתב מרן בכסף משנה שם ובית יוסף כאן, דבר דברי הרמב"ם שהחמיר לעניין חבית מוטה משום דבעינן כוח נותן, מה טעם יש לחלק בזה בין קוף ובין שאר בעלי חיים? From the basic readings of Maran that we have until now, in the Rambam there, it doesn't really seem to make a difference which animal is pouring. There's nothing special about a monkey versus, I don't know if you trained a cat. It would be the same thing. All Maran wants to know is, what is Maran's requirement? Remember we read Maran's requirement? That the water, we start talking about barrels on their side. Do you remember this? Here, page 118. Maran writes on page 118, the waters must come from a source of a person pouring, of something pouring. I mean, something has to be pouring water. Yeah? So, according to this, what difference does it make to Maran if that something is a monkey or that something is a rhinoceros? Who cares? The bottom line, as long as there's a force that is pouring water on your hands, that's enough. And the truth is, if you look in the writings of Rabbeinu Manoach, I'll let you Google him. One of the Rishonim has a comment in the Rambam. Rabbeinu Manoach writes, "Dahainu afilu behema." Rabbeinu Manoach, his commentary in the Rambam, when Rambam mentions the monkey, he says, and even any other animal, like even if livestock were to pour water on your hands somehow, that would count.
Would it count if they're using like their mouths and not their actual hands?
Not really. That's a good question. I was thinking about it. What if it was a contraption they pull? But here, I say as long as they're the ones pouring water.
Is this whole idea of talking about animals pouring water, which is highly unlikely, is it just to say that there is a possibility that there could be no kavanah on the part of the pourer?
We're trying to. We're trying to push the. We're trying to see how far do you push the boundaries in terms of kavanah. What is the bare minimum of kavanah that has to happen? I mean, if the monkey has no kavanah, but the person does, is that enough kavanah? Yes. Is the monkey enough of a giving power, meaning a pouring power, that's considered being done by someone pouring water, or is that like putting your hands in the rain, which would not work for that today?
Well, you can definitely train monkeys to do all kinds of things like
But
that.
why? What?
But let's say you had a table like 100 people.
Yes, but it's not the point. This
Yeah.
the whole. There are places where like circuses that train animals. I'm not saying they're
Okay.
positive places to be. I'm just telling you
Yeah.
there are places that train animals to do all kinds of crazy things. And not,
I know.
that's not the point of this halakha. Maran is
Right.
not actually saying, if you live in Gibraltar and you happen to pick up a pet monkey in the mountain and you want to train him to be your hand washer, it's not where Maran is coming from. Maran is coming from a place of
This nature of the person.
the ability.
being.
Very good.
do
Yes.
it.
So Rabbeinu Manoach says any animal. Aval ha'meiri. You remember the meiri?
Yeah.
The Meiri is the one where we study about churches. He lets people.
Yeah.
Christianity is not avodah zarah. Yeah. The Meiri, bekuntras bet yad shebsov brachot, in a little kuntras that he has in the end of tractate brachot, katav lebe'er dat Rambam sheichshir bekov. He explains. He says, "Do you know why the Rambam allows a monkey to wash their hands? Mipnei shehu domeh harbe la'adam. It's because he's very similar to a human being.
Mhm.
Here, Meiri is saying it's not that an animal is able to pour water and therefore that pouring water is enough as long as you have kavanah. He says the Rambam specifically chooses a monkey because a monkey is more similar to a human being than another animal. According to the Meiri, then another animal who pours water in your hands, it wouldn't be good enough. See, do you see when we study halakha and you say, but the Rambam said an animal can pour water in your hands. Why the commentaries are crucial? Because the commentaries are trying to help you understand why did the Rambam say that. Now, one commentary says the Rambam is just saying that any animal can pour water in your hands. The Rambam says no, it's monkey specific. This is dafka about a monkey, because a monkey is very similar to a human being. In which case, two people are now reading the Rambam and walking away with two conflicting ideas from the Rambam. This is where we talk about interpretation. And which opinion are we holding right? Ultimately, what this is going to end up for us is there are now two opinions regarding other animals. And that's why he rules on top. It's better for you to avoid other animals aside from monkeys if you're Sephardic. If you're Ashkenazi, you can't use a monkey anyways. And we determined that before. But if you're Sephardic and you want to use a monkey, so it would be better to use a monkey versus another animal. At least if you want to take both of those opinions into consideration. If you don't want to take both into consideration, so you'll choose the one that's more lenient and you'll be able to use any animal. But this is exactly what a posek does when a posek tries to rule a halakhic question. Is to see the opinions, to understand the sugya better. Some of the opinions you might say, hey, I have a source against his opinion. Meaning, maybe somewhere else the Rambam is going to write about monkeys, and whenever he says monkeys, he doesn't only mean monkeys, in which case it doesn't make a difference who comments on the Rambam. That gets thrown out of the water. But I don't want to do the rest of the source. I don't want to waste time studying about monkeys. But Lamasa, you see a little bit here of a machloket. There's a machloket on the commentaries of the Rambam, and that directly affects the halakha later on. Yes.
I still don't get. Why do I care if an animal can pour? I mean, you do it yourself, or you get it someone else.
It's the
Or in the
principle.
unlikely situation, you'd have a monkey.
No, it's a very likely
But-
situation. You remember that we
What?
studied, I said this earlier, we weren't here for this. We talk about a child that's under the age of 6. And halakha's child under the age of 6 has the same dad as a monkey.
Okay, so
It doesn't have the intelligence to have kavanah in a mitzvah. I'm not saying it doesn't have intelligence. I have children that are under the age of 6, I don't think they're monkeys. But is not able to say, have kavanah, you're doing a mitzvah, l'shem yichud kol shabbat. I'm not thinking of my 6-year-old. So, whatever we learn by a monkey is going to be relevant to us by a 6-year-old child.
So say a 6-year-old child.
We did.
So
Now we're
why
going
don't
back
we
to
do
the
it?
origin of that halakha. It's really here to teach on other things. It's a principle. It's not It could be that if you ran a circus, it would be a practical example. But for most people throughout history who've studied this piece of Shulchan Aruch, has nothing to do with the practical.
You see
case
that a
of
lot in
monkeys.
the Talmud. It's like a lot of people like scoff the thing of, well, how does that relate to me or anything? We're never going to see a situation like that. But really, again, it's the principle behind it. And you can apply it to a lot of different
Yes.
things.
You
I
know, you see this
The
when people
principles you
when
have
people,
covenant, you don't have covenant.
when people will
Right.
debate
You
something.
could say with a 6-year-old.
Oftentimes, when I'll debate something, I'll bring the most drastic, fanatical example I can think of. The reason? It's not because that's a good case or that's not normally going to happen that way. But it brings out, listen, in the dialogue of, and this is a question that comes up, in the dialogue of accepting a person who did teshuvah, I'm not talking about a person who drove on Shabbat and Nasta, like someone who really committed a crime, they're insurance fraud. Now can we accept them back into the community? How does that process go? What would the community want from a person in order to accept them back in the community? You might hear someone say, well, would I let a murderer into the community? We're not talking about a murderer, we're talking about somebody who played with some numbers on there. You're correct. Nobody's actually considering welcoming murderers into the community. We're trying to choose the most extreme example because there we could all agree on something. It could be that in a community of people, we also cheat on our taxes, so we don't really think it's such a big deal. I mean, it could be, and then what do you have? You have different opinions because not everybody feels the same about a certain matter. When you go to the most extreme, is somewhere everyone was going to agree on. They might not like the example, but from that example, you can then project back to what it is you're trying to discuss. But someone who gets lost in the middle, and there are people who fall off the bandwagon in the middle, they don't follow that thought process, and then they think it's so ridiculous. You know, we were learning a sugya, they're talking about letting murderers into the synagogue. They're crazy over there in the synagogue. Correct, because you didn't really get it. Yeah, this happens a lot. We do this a lot, I'm sure, in every area of discussion. And people they tend to disqualify such things. Like, oh, don't bring such an extreme example. Why not? That is part of the way that you elucidate things, is by pushing to a place where we can agree on the concept and then come back and have a more specific case about what it is that we're talking about at hand.
But if you lose any chain of that train of thought, whether it's, you were daydreaming or something happened, so you had to answer a call, or you show up late, or you weren't at the class before, you really are left in a sense without the ability to come to a logical conclusion about something.
No, absolutely.
And that's a big problem because people don't have the attention span to follow it all the way through a lot of times. As you know, in the yeshivas themselves, there people are sitting all day, but things get fragmented very quickly.
Well, this is actually a critique. We just got this critique recently over YouTube. Someone wrote us a nice love letter about these Kollel classes. I don't know, we're talking about something about it. I don't remember. People are not used to studying halakha in such a fashion that you go back to sources and reevaluate them and open them up again and discuss them again. And we can't, like if I were to remember at Tisha B'Av, I said, you can do this, you can wear that. If I were to do that for lots of Tisha B'Av, we'd be here the whole day. Because at the end of the day, you need to be able to summarize what can I do, what can I not do. But when you study halakha intelligently, you can't just rely on reading books and say, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that, and not understanding, because that's not an ideal way of studying at all. It may be practical, but it doesn't help in terms of comprehension. And with actions it helps, but not with comprehension. And this style of...
But action without comprehension is very limited. It's
Correct.
You really
Yeah,
are
rather
a technician
proper
rather than a...
Most people I talk to...
What's that?
Then you can't have the proper
Correct.
Right.
Most people I talk to say, I hate learning halakha. The average Jew that I speak to, especially those who went to Jewish school, I hate learning halakha. And I was like, halakha is one of the few places like I'm comfortable in. That's my place. Why do you hate halakha so much? It is so boring. Boring? Why is it boring? Well, because when you study Chumash, you got opinions and you have ideas. Study halakha, it's so boring. I said, what book did you study halakha? Oh, we studied Kitzur Shulchan Aruch.
God's field.
Rav Shlomo Gansfried, Alav Shalom, did a tremendous service to the Jewish community. He came into a world where people weren't reading Hebrew, they weren't owning books, they didn't know. And he said, listen, I'm going to very simply, from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, in one little volume, I'm going to, all the halachot you need to know. There's not one explanation there why you do something, how you do, if there's a variety of opinions on something, it's just do this, don't do that. The whole purpose, this is a manual for being Jewish. Rav Shlomo Gansfried wrote this book not as an end to a means. He wrote this book so the person could say, okay, now I know how to be observant, now let's go study why. Let's go understand the halachot more. Let's go. The problem is the Jewish community, instead of doing that, has made this book a primary staple in the realm of halakha. And then people say, well, first off, halakha is very rigid. There's only one opinion. Two, that opinion has to be very strict. Correct. Shlomo Gansfried was a rabbi in Hungary. If you know anything about the Hungarian Jews, were very, very staunchly religious. They lived in their own little world. And they had luxury. A Jew from Germany would read a Shulchan Aruch. Not only would it sound foreign to them, it wouldn't even sound like something their rabbis would tell them, because the Jews of Germany were dealing with very different, more modern realities than the Jews of Hungary were. There's a lot of Kabbalah that under the scenes goes into the Shulchan Aruch, which is why, ironically, Sfaradim who love Kabbalah and the Ben Ish Chai will very often study Shulchan Aruch as a companion to the Ben Ish Chai, because a lot of Kabbalistic stuff that is going on that is codified as halakha, but really people don't know that it's not halakha. It's a really extra level of stringency based on Kabbalistic writings. And then I say, the reason you hate halakha is because you've never actually learned halakha before. You've never sat down and studied a pasuk from the Chumash and followed it through to the Mishnah, to the Talmud, to the Rishonim, to the Charonim, Shulchan Aruch. You've never done that. So no wonder it's boring for you. The justification of those who teach halakha the other way is very simple. I once had a rabbi tell me, I'm not going to lie to you, right now I'm telling you something, someone's going to take it out of context and make me in trouble one day. He said, when you teach halakha to women, like this, you must just teach yes, no, do this, don't do that. And I said, why? I can't even say. They lack the comprehension skills to be able to follow through a halakhic conversation.
Who said that?
Like
It's a
a
rabbi
monkey.
that I spoke to one.
Yeah,
He's considered like a primary educator in the...
Well, they're better than a monkey.
You don't know, maybe you have to ask him what he thinks.
Excuse me?
But when you hear this, you understand what you're hearing here. What you're hearing here is the person saying, in an interesting way, I'm trying to do a service. I don't want to confuse people with the facts.
You're in trouble now.
I don't want to confuse them.
Now we're
I don't want to confuse them with the details.
Now we're going to talk about female monkeys.
Can you imagine me telling my wife, Devarin, I would love to explain this halakha to you, but you're just too stupid to understand. Can you imagine that? I'm sure, by the way, there are men like that in the world. I'm positive. I'm not even a question of my man. But people in their...
It hasn't met the female.
This is a certain...
neurosurgeons and great physicists of the world.
Oh,
like
very.
that.
This is the Chavetz writes. When the Beis Yaakov movement started, women. I don't think that in Beis Yaakov they were teaching girls Gemara, and it was a very elementary Jewish education. No, they weren't teaching big either. She was a very special person, Sarah Schneer. But that whole movement was, let's teach women because they're already going to university, they're already working, and this is already a modern Europe. For us, it's old, but for them it was. How could it be that a lady knows so much about her profession, or what's the name? But they asked her a question about Chumash. I've never read that book before. Chavetz Chaim, he writes just that. He says, listen, if you want to, says you're living in a world. You says you're out of touch with the reality of the world today. How could it be that a lady will know everything in the world except her own religion?
Mm-hmm.
Now, how long have things like Midrash and Lindenbaum been around? My daughter was.
Probably as long as the Lindenbaum have been around.
Because
Not so long.
That's quite a rigorous education. For
Correct.
them.
So there's, and Baruch Hashem, you see today a whole area of women's Torah study that is admirable, unbelievably impressive. But there are still places where that's not the case. I mean, that's still a thing. Right? It's very normal. Even in San Diego, I hear, well, women should never study Gemara. I don't give a Gemara class here that does it formally. I simply don't feel that we have enough hours in the week to also give a Gemara class. There are more important things we need to study. I know that I'm not me, but our Bet Midrash is unique in that regard. But if we were to have a Gemara class here, it wouldn't be a men's only Gemara class. If a person wanted to, and we had a Gadata that we studied here. It was open to anybody who wanted to come study a Gadata. Well, how could you say only men just in a world where like you're talking about surgeons and doctors and lawyers and accountants and all kinds of professionals, but Torah, hey, you shouldn't come. It's not for you.
Probably in the older times, women were not taking up professions like that or whatever.
In
But this is more society reasons than
Why do I have to be
cognitive.
so hard to even tell you this? My grandmother, great grandmother, if I would sit with her and say, "You want to study Gemara, Bava Metzia?" Probably she would tell me no. I'm not telling you now something that's I don't view her any less because of that. What's expected and what people were, she was better in many other fields that today people don't even, they won't even be able to. But as things change, so do our approaches to things change. It doesn't mean that 100 years ago they were wrong about this. 100 years ago there was a different reality in the street about this too. But to be here today with the mentality of 100 years ago, that's wrong.
Right.
Because
What about Bruria? Rabbi Meir's wife?
I've quoted
So
many
long
times
ago.
here a number
She's a
of
woman.
Rabbaniot
She
that
was
were
a woman.
teaching. Of course.
So how could anybody really say?
Unfortunately, Bruria had a very tragic ending to her story.
Okay,
And
but
people,
nevertheless.
no,
she-
I'm not using it this way. But people use that story to say, you see what happens when
It
women know
happens
too
when-
much.
Oh, please.
No, I've heard it. And maybe even heard it from the same person I quoted to before.
A woman was too smart for her own good type of conclusion.
Yes, absolutely. We can't be oblivious to the fact that this opinion exists in the Jewish community. I mentioned the
Yeah.
Satmar Rebbe. And the Satmar Rebbe believed that even the things that women study in Jewish schools, they shouldn't be allowed to study from books. It's still a thing today in Satmar.
Oral.
The teacher will have a chumash, but the students are not allowed to open one.
It sounds
And
like it's so true.
he blamed all the ultra-Orthodox schools in the East Coast for deviating from Jewish tradition by allowing women the ability to read Jewish books. It's something he fought tooth and nail back. And the letters that he has, you will read them, and if you put them under someone else's name from Saudi Arabia, same exact thing.
Sounds like the Catholic Church before the Protestants.
It sounds like
Wahhabis.
we have to be very careful when we hold on to ideas. This idea, is it a Jewish idea at its root? Is it a societal idea? Is it objective? Is it subjective? And people have a very hard time with halakha in having these conversations.